The night she whispered those words, my entire world seemed to stop. My wife's cafe had already gone dark, the chairs were upside down on the tables, the rain tapped softly against the windows, and the only sounds left were our footsteps echoing across the empty floor. I had spent hours helping my wife's business partner lock up after the busiest day they had ever experienced. As she turned off the last light, she looked at me with exhausted eyes filled with emotion and quietly asked me to come upstairs with her. In that single moment, every fear, every assumption, and every painful possibility rushed through my mind. I had no idea that what waited upstairs would change not only my marriage, but the lives of everyone I loved. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, honesty, and second chances can transform lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us that compassion is always stronger than fear. My name is Daniel, and for nearly 12 years my wife, Emma, had been the strongest person I knew. We had built our life together through countless sacrifices, celebrating victories that looked ordinary to everyone else but felt enormous to us. We never became wealthy, but we learned how to find joy in small accomplishments. Emma dreamed of opening a neighborhood cafe where people could forget their worries for a little while. After years of saving every extra dollar, she finally partnered with her college friend Sophie, whose talent for baking perfectly matched Emma's gift for making strangers feel welcome. The cafe quickly became the heart of the neighborhood. Every morning, construction workers, teachers, nurses, retirees, and college students filled the tiny dining room with laughter and conversation. It wasn't simply a place to buy coffee. It became a place where birthdays were celebrated, job offers were announced, friendships were formed, and lonely people found familiar faces waiting for them every morning. Because I worked as an electrician, I often stopped by after work whenever something needed fixing. Whether it was replacing a faulty light fixture, repairing an espresso machine, or carrying heavy deliveries, I never minded helping. Watching Emma chase her dream made every long day worthwhile. Sophie was equally hardworking. She arrived before sunrise every morning to bake fresh bread and pastries from recipes passed down by her grandmother. Despite her cheerful personality, I often noticed sadness hiding behind her smile. She rarely talked about her personal life, and Emma respected her privacy. I assumed she simply preferred keeping work and home separate. One autumn evening, Emma received an urgent phone call that her father had been taken to the hospital after suffering chest pains. She rushed out immediately, asking me to help Sophie close the cafe because customers were still finishing dinner. Without hesitation, I agreed. Closing the cafe turned out to be far more difficult than I expected. Equipment had to be cleaned, inventory counted, receipts balanced, and tomorrow's ingredients prepared. Nearly 3 hours passed before the last task was finally complete. As we locked the front door, Sophie stood silently for several moments. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the keys. Then she looked toward the narrow staircase leading to the apartment above the cafe where she lived alone. She quietly asked me to come upstairs with her. For one brief second, my mind filled with terrible assumptions. The request felt unexpected, and I suddenly understood how easily misunderstandings begin. But the expression on her face wasn't one of temptation. It was fear. Deep, overwhelming fear. When we reached the small apartment, everything finally made sense. The living room was filled with cardboard boxes, medical bills, unopened letters, and stacks of legal documents. Sitting quietly beside the window was an elderly woman wrapped in a blanket. Sophie's mother smiled weakly as she tried to stand, but illness had stolen nearly all of her strength. Sophie apologized for asking me upstairs. She explained that her mother had been battling an aggressive illness for over a year. The treatments had emptied every savings account she had. Sophie had hidden the struggle from Emma because she refused to let personal problems interfere with the cafe. She feared Emma would insist on carrying the burden herself, and she couldn't bear the thought of risking the business they had both worked so hard to build. Then she handed me an envelope. Inside were overdue medical invoices, notices from the bank, and a final warning that the apartment could soon be lost if payments weren't made. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking me to keep secrets. She simply didn't know who else she could trust to help her tell Emma the truth. Driving home that night, my heart felt heavier than it ever had. I understood why Sophie had hidden everything, but I also knew that carrying such pain alone would eventually destroy her. The next morning, Emma sat beside her father's hospital bed, relieved that doctors expected him to recover. I gently told her everything. For a long time she remained silent. Then tears slowly filled her eyes. She wasn't hurt because Sophie had hidden the truth. She was heartbroken because her closest friend had believed she needed to suffer alone. That afternoon we visited Sophie together. Instead of anger, Emma wrapped her friend in a hug that seemed to erase months of loneliness. Neither woman needed perfect words. Sometimes forgiveness begins with simple presence. Over the following weeks, our community revealed the extraordinary power hidden inside ordinary people. A retired carpenter repaired broken furniture without charging a cent. Local musicians volunteered to perform weekend concerts. Artists donated paintings for charity auctions. Nearby businesses contributed supplies. Customers who had only intended to buy coffee quietly left generous tips after learning the cafe needed help supporting Sophie's family. No single person solved the problem. Hundreds of small acts of kindness became one enormous miracle. I spent evenings repairing the upstairs apartment so Sophie's mother could move around more safely. Friends installed handrails, widened doorways, and built a wheelchair ramp. Teenagers from the neighborhood painted the walls with bright colors that made the apartment feel hopeful again. For the first time in months, Sophie stopped pretending she was fine. She allowed people to help. That simple decision changed everything. Months passed, and although her mother's condition remained serious, she experienced something money could never buy. She was surrounded by people who genuinely cared. One afternoon, Sophie's mother quietly told me that illness had taken many things from her, but it had also shown her the incredible beauty of human compassion. She said she no longer measured wealth by bank accounts. She measured it by the number of people willing to stand beside someone during life's hardest moments. Those words stayed with me. Nearly a year later, the cafe celebrated its 5th anniversary. The little shop was busier than ever. On one wall hung dozens of framed photographs showing volunteers, customers, neighbors, hospital staff, delivery drivers, firefighters, teachers, and families who had become part of its story. Above the pictures was a wooden sign that simply read, "Kindness is always on the menu." Every person who walked through those doors unknowingly became part of something much bigger than a business. They became part of a family. Looking back, I often think about that rainy night when Sophie whispered for me to come upstairs. Had I allowed suspicion to control my thoughts? Had I refused to listen? Had I assumed the worst instead of offering compassion? An entire community might never have discovered someone desperately needed help. Life constantly reminds us that appearances rarely tell the whole story. Sometimes the sentence we fear most becomes the beginning of the greatest act of kindness we will ever witness. If this story touched your heart, please support the channel by liking this video, sharing it with someone who believes in hope, subscribing for more inspiring stories, and leaving a comment about a time when kindness changed your life or someone else's. Special request: before the ending, please comment, choose compassion, if you believe understanding someone is always more powerful than judging them too quickly. Emma's father eventually recovered. Sophie's mother lived long enough to watch another spring arrive, surrounded by laughter, friendship, and love instead of fear. The cafe continued serving coffee every morning, but its greatest recipe was never written on a menu. It was found in the hearts of people who discovered that showing up for one another is the richest gift anyone can ever give. Whenever I lock the cafe doors after helping at closing time, I still glance toward the staircase above. It reminds me that behind every closed door may be a story we cannot see, a burden someone is quietly carrying, or a life waiting to be changed by one simple decision, to climb the stairs with kindness instead of suspicion. And in the end, that choice made all the difference.